Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
This is really a great day for democracy in New York.
Hello and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Liz Koenig. Today we have an update for you on the state budget. We'll also be talking about some related issues and some other legislation which has recently passed in the New York State Assembly. Joining me to discuss these topics is our guest, Assemblyman Dinowitz, who represents the 81st Assembly District in the Bronx. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Well, good morning.
Very good to see you. It's a very, very busy time here at the Capitol we are kind of in the throes of the budget season here. Budget hearings have completed and now we're moving on to revenue. What should be in the budget, what should not be in the budget. And there are always some policy issues that kind of get tacked on to the budget. But first of all, let's talk about where we are in the process and what the differences are between the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor at this point.
Okay, well, first of all, today, which is March 12th, we are about to pass our one-house budget resolution. Both the Senate and the Assembly will pass resolutions. And the resolutions are, it's not the budget, but it essentially outlines what we want in the budget, sort of indicates our priorities, and it's more of a statement than anything else. And we work from that for the next 2.5 weeks to come to an agreement between us and the Senate, as well as the governor, on all aspects of the budget. So tomorrow we're going to be voting on that. And there are some, as always is the case, there are some controversial issues. While normally healthcare and Medicaid and education sort of take center stage because that's where the big bucks are at, and that's usually where the big fights are at as well. And there's still that's the case this year. But there are other issues which have come to the forefront this year, and things that we need to resolve. But then there's always the overriding question: should we be resolving policy issues in the budget, which is generally what the governor wants, or should we be dealing with those issues independently? And the so-called good government position has always been, don't do these policy areas in the budget, do them separately. Why? Because in the budget process, the governor pretty much holds most of the cards, and he has an incredible amount of leverage. And there are a lot of important issues which deserve to be discussed and debated on their own independently rather than put into a larger bill. Because when you put issues into a huge bill, that's how things kind of get snuck through, and that's, that very often also happens at the end of the legislative session as well. Lots of unrelated things are put together, and even if there are bad things in it, if you want to vote to get some of the good things done, you got to take the bad with the good, essentially.
And how does congestion pricing tie into this?
The effort that's being made is to deal with this issue, and this is an enormous issue. Congestion pricing involves billions of dollars, and it's a major policy change. It would involve tolling people who drive below 60th Street, or below 61st, actually. And so while it's a major revenue issue, it's also a policy issue. It's, in my opinion, that is likely to be dealt with in the budget. The question is, how specifically will it be dealt with? I think there's virtually universal agreement that we have to have money coming in for the MTA to keep our subways and buses going. And it's more than just keep them going. It's to fix the problems, improve service, and so on. And the cost of that, it's not billions of dollars. It's actually tens of billions of dollars. So I think everybody agrees we have to find a way to come up with the money. I have not been a supporter of congestion pricing in the past, and I'm not specifically endorsing it, but I will say that I think the overriding issue is getting the job done, and I'm willing to consider any and all options to save our subways.
Now, campaign finance, also a big issue this year. Well, in previous years as well, yes.
It's always an issue. Some groups have made this their, like the #1 issue. It's one of many important issues. I've always supported campaign finance reform and continue to support it, and that includes lowering contribution limits, and it also includes setting up a system of small matching small donors' donations to campaigns, what some would call public financing. The question is getting to the right outcome. It's lots of controversy around it. I think many of my colleagues in the Assembly support public financing. I know a number of the senators do. Where we end up, I don't know. It's in the governor's original budget proposal, but there are also some issues involved. We know that there are huge problems with the city's matching fund system, as good as the concept is, and it's been effective in many ways, but there are big problems with it. And there's also a huge cost attached to it. Some have estimated the cost could be as much as $100 million. If lots of candidates run and get matching funds, you do the math. It's a lot of money. And when we have a multi-billion-dollar deficit where we're cutting money from important areas, many people have complained to me, how can we possibly pay for people's campaigns when we have all these problems? And my response generally is we have to look at everything and and realize that public financing has tremendous benefits to it as well. Hopefully if candidates are less dependent upon some of the huge donations from people who don't necessarily share our interests, that will create better policy outcomes, which might create better fiscal outcomes. The other thing I'm concerned about is under whatever system we devise, we should look at the issue of the globs of money that come in from outside New York State. I don't like that. I don't like, the Koch brothers. Actually, I don't even know what state they're from, but having influence in our election. So personally, I think we should ban contributions from outside of New York State.
That's an interesting proposal. We'll have to, you could put it in the legislation.
That's my feeling.
Let's do it. So mayoral control, back on the hot topics list. What's the debate currently on this issue?
I mean, I didn't think this would be such a big debate. Mayoral control has been an issue for forever. I think back in 2002 maybe is when we legislated to create mayoral control. This was Bloomberg's big push, and we created, I think, mayoral control for 5 years, and then it was had to be renewed, and we renewed it for 6 years. And since de Blasio came in, though, when the Republicans ran the Senate, they would basically torture him, saying we shouldn't have mayoral control, we should have it for 1 year. If you want it, you got to give us this, that, and the other thing. So things are a little different now, but the issue is still, there's a lot of disagreement about it. So there are two basic issues. One is, maybe three, should we continue mayoral control? If so, for how long? And should we have that in the budget? Because again, it's a policy decision. It's not a fiscal decision, although it has clearly fiscal ramifications. The school budget being, I don't know, $10 billion for the state. So that, as of today, that hasn't been totally resolved, but I think it will be resolved. The issue of mayoral control, people's opinions change based upon who's the mayor, among other things. I was never a big fan of mayoral control, and I'm still not, but my attitude is this issue's kind of been settled, and I don't think we should keep going back and forth, changing the way things are run in the school system. We need some kind of stability. We can't be, spending more time dealing with who controls the school system. I'd rather spend my time dealing with getting the proper resources to make sure the kids have the best possible outcomes. I mean, that's kind of one of my concerns about the new chancellor. I guess he's not that new anymore. He seems to be more focused on certain policy issues or structural issues rather than dealing with the fact that we should make sure that when kids come into pre-K, that every kid has an equal opportunity then, and not just worry about dealing with the issue in 8th grade, for example. We have to start every kid off in the best possible position, and by talking about other issues, they're not really focusing on the fact that lots of kids are failing, and they're failing from day one.
And another issue that might not be in the budget, but probably should be because the revenue side of it is the legalization of adult recreational use marijuana.
Right now, at the moment, today, Tuesday, March 12th, there is not agreement on that. I think there's broad agreement that the laws need to be changed, that legalization seems to be the majority position right now. The question is how to do it, what happens with the revenue that's generated by it, and some people think it should go to the MTA. Others think a lot of the revenue should go to be focused on communities that have been particularly impacted by the negative effects of the current law. So there's a lot of controversy, and that's, I think, the main reason why we haven't come up with an agreement. And of course, there are others who don't think we should legalize it. They would say marijuana is a gateway drug. A lot of us think alcohol is a gateway drug. So, you know, it depends on your point of view. But I think ultimately, whether it's now, and it could be, you know, now, or in the near future, I think we will have legalization.
Now, another issue you've been very outspoken on is the use of tobacco, and a piece of legislation recently passed in the Assembly which raises the age to purchase tobacco products to 21 in New York State. Your feelings on that?
I think we should make the minimum age to purchase tobacco 90, but I don't think that's likely to happen. I do think it's good. We should, if we can't stop everybody from smoking, but I think we should do everything possible to discourage young people from taking up the habit in the first place. That, you know, it's no accident that over the years cigarette companies have focused their efforts on basically getting new recruits, because honestly, and I mean, I hate to say it this way, but you know, people who smoke, they don't all stay around forever. And so the only way they can stay in business is to get new smokers. And in the United States, I mean, they look outside the United States, of course, but within the United States, the best place to get new smokers is among young people who haven't smoked yet. So everything we do, whether it's having a high tobacco tax or raising the age, all those things I think will prevent some younger people from smoking, and that's really important. We don't want people to die. We don't want people to impose huge healthcare costs on the system itself. So I supported that. Not everybody agrees. Some people think, well, if you can vote at 18, if you can, you know, go to war at 18, and so on, you should be able to buy a pack of cigarettes. But I don't happen to agree with that.
Now, we have 1 minute left. I want to get one more issue in, and that is this proposal that's out there to split New York. Some have said into 2 parts, some into 3 parts. How do you feel about this? Well,
I happen to think New York City would benefit tremendously from being split off from the rest of New York, even though that's not what the sponsor of this poorly thought out idea thinks. I don't want to see that happen. You know, when I was a kid, New York was the biggest state, the most in terms of population. Then California overtook us, then Texas, now Florida. I mean, is it important for us to be one of the top states? Probably not. If we was split off, New York City would have 2 senators. Senator Schumer's from New York City, and well, Senator Gillibrand isn't, so I guess she wouldn't be one of them. Is it really a smart idea? If I was an upstater, the last thing I'd want to do is be split off from New York, being that New York basically pays the tabs, New York City, for the rest of the state. A disproportionate amount of tax revenue is generated by New York City. New York City heavily subsidizes the rest of the state. So the rest of the state, in a sense, kind of is benefiting from New York City more than the other way around. But we have a great state. All corners of the state are great, and we should remain one state. That's a silly idea.
Okay. Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz, who represents the 81st Assembly District in the Bronx. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.